Welcome everyone to the Trust the Plan podcast. I'm Nick Hopwood. Jim Pilot is out today, and we have a very special guest, Mr. Christopher Robert Duprey, formerly known as Dupe Scoop for the Michigan Daily. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nick. Great to be here.
So tell me about the Michigan Daily experience, right? Culmination of covering the football beat with your column, Dupe Scoop, right?
Sure. And I got to campus, and you don't play sports anymore, really, other than intramurals, and you're looking for something to do and a way to plug in. And so you start thinking, and you read the paper, and you're like, hey, I'd like to do that. And you know what? I'll just walk right in, and I'll cover the football beat, because what else is there to do at Michigan? So you walk in, and the guy says, great, you want to write sports? Write down 3 sports you'd like to do. Do not write down football, basketball, or hockey. And you realize that it's a long road to get to those spots, and you had to work hard. And it wasn't just writing the stories; you had to lay out the paper, et cetera. Because Michigan does not have a formal journalism program. I think they once did, and they got rid of it. Very different from other universities like Michigan State and others that have journalism programs. And so it's entirely student led. And you get there, and you work your way up the ranks, and that's how it goes.
Not everyone gets to write the football beat senior year. You have to show your skills, right? So Seth Fisher, who is the editor at MGO Blog, he was on the Professor and the Pundit episode a few weeks back, and he was at the Daily as well. Did you guys cross paths?
No, we didn't, or if so, it might have been at the very end. And
he was younger.
There were 30 or so staffers on sports, and they all have varying degrees of commitment levels. Some people are there every day. Some people you see once a week, or some people maybe you never see. And some start in arts or news and move to the sports section. So there's a lot of activity in the building.
Now, last week, MGO Blog just released their football season preview. It was 3 hours long. I haven't got through all of it yet. This is our Peak Wealth Management Michigan football season preview, and this is our expert, Chris Duprey, who was the Michigan Daily columnist. So that's what we're here to do. Now, a couple weeks ago, a client of ours said, hey, I don't care about football. So why are you doing that on the podcast? And I said, well, because I like it. I love football, and Michigan football is one of my number one passions. And so I want to talk about it. And I know we do have quite a lot of Michigan fans in the client base as well. So that's why we're doing this, even though it's not financial related.
I love it.
Go ahead.
I love it. I'm here for it.
So, let's talk about Michigan, maybe at the end of last year, coming into this year, your general feelings, and then we can kind of, get into the nitty gritty.
Sure. Well, I deal with 2 very disappointed kids when you lose the last game of the year in the fashion that they did. And maybe age has gotten me to see the wider perspective. I said, guys, if you sign up for 13 wins and a Big Ten championship and a win over Ohio State, and then you fall short in the national semifinal, sign me up for that every year. I forget which movie it is that somebody said that the good old days are here. They're, recognize them while we're having them, and we certainly are. So no shame in that. And, we're trying to win the last game, but in the meantime, and that may or may never happen, but we're going to look back on this and say these were great years for Michigan football regardless.
Absolutely. I got to stop you there. I had a question that I forgot to ask about your coverage back in the day. So this would have been, you're covering the football beat the year 2000, our senior year.
Yes.
Down in the Horseshoe. Just give a 30, 60 second. You were texting me about your memories about that game, the Henson win.
Sure. I mean, leading up to it, and there's almost dark shadows about that, because you're very excited for the team heading into fall camp. Drew Henson suffers a foot injury. You're forced to play John Navarre right out of the gate, and I think that season could have gone even better and much different had you had Henson from the very beginning. Still successful. They did not win the outright Big Ten championship, and Purdue went to the Rose Bowl that year. But you go into Columbus knowing you need to win, and you need to hope Antoine Randall
and we lost to Drew
does
Brees.
Something special. Yes, lost to Drew Brees, 28-10 halftime lead, and that 28-point first half was the most successful Michigan football offensive half maybe in my lifetime.
Against a real component.
A real opponent, but 4 drives, 6, 7, 8 minutes long, controlling the ball, throwing to the tight ends. I mean, it was a masterpiece, and to lose that game is one of the has to be top 10 regrets I've had in Michigan football.
I think we watched that Touchdown Cafe on South U. I think it was me and you and Dave.
Yes, I think you're right.
Okay,
So we go to Ohio
yeah,
State.
tell us about that
We go to
game.
Ohio State, and at that point, Michigan was winning 3 out of 4 against Ohio State. So you actually had a quiet level of confidence going into it. And Ohio State gets out to an early lead. It might have been 12-0. I just remember we did not have enough press passes because there were 4 Michigan Daily writers, and the Ohio State sports information director said, "I'll get you 3 passes and you'll like it." And so I volunteered to go down to the field, and I had a coat on, of course, but it was no match for the elements. I mean, I'd have to look back and see what temperature it was.
It was cold.
Had to be in the high 20s, I feel. And the only thing I could do was encroach past the dashed line where media and others are to stand behind to get close to those BTU heaters that were just kicking out a ton of heat just to survive the game. But it was a fantastic game. And as time went on, you began to realize like they have a chance to do this and pull it off. And they go race ahead. And then Ohio State scores 2 touchdowns, and they need Drew Henson's walk in to seal the win.
And so tell me about your coat.
I got it secondhand from Dave Shannon, my roommate, and it was a leather coat and it had nice pockets and things like that. It was kind of beat up. It was classic for that age of time, and it might have hung halfway down your legs. It was a long coat.
Okay, so it was a generic leather coat.
Yes.
It was not a Michigan branded starter jacket or anything Michigan related. No Michigan hat, no Michigan gloves.
Right.
Like you're probably concerned about the cold, but also you don't want to get you don't want to rile up the Ohio State crazies. Right?
Well, you're supposed to be part of the working media, and so even then, you're going to Michigan, you're rooting for Michigan. You can't outwardly show that, and you're supposed to show some kind of level of objectivity, dispassionate nature in your articles and in your coverage. So all of that fit together, and we actually got a tail light knocked out of our rental car on the way back, and not on the way back, but while the game was going on, and we asked the cop, "What do we do?" And the guy's suggestion was, "Go get some red tape from the hardware store and tape it up." And we're like, "We don't have time for this. Let's just run the risk and go."
In 2002, I was down there. I was in the stands for that game, by the way. And then in 2002, down there as well, and my car got towed. It was parked totally legal, and it was gone. And I didn't have any money. I had to go get out of hock.
Oh,
all right. Let's get back to the 23 season. Okay. So we have the schedule behind us here. The first 3 weeks are notable, not because of the opponent, but because Harbaugh is serving a self-imposed suspension because of Cheeseburger Gate.
It's just going to provide opportunities for other people and other coaches. You're seeing that in the NFL these days, or Lane Kiffin having his assistant take over the team for a scrimmage or a game. It's becoming kind of like the nouveau thing to do to give others opportunities. We don't know enough to know enough, right? And so in the end, they're going to say, "I can't talk about it." And then when it's done, they're going to say, "Well, it's behind us, and I'd prefer not to talk about it." So we will never get the truth on what's happened, right? However, I actually think it presents a unique opportunity. Imagine this. Harbaugh rents out the State Street Buffalo Wild Wings. He hosts something during 1 or 2 or 3 of these games, maybe that Bowling Green night game. He walks around, shakes hands, poses for pictures. Entry fees $500, and it goes to the Michigan Victors NIL Fund. And he sort of creates an entertainment fundraising event because he's always looking for the altruistic nature in everything he does. So that's my idea.
I pictured, he's at home, right, following the rules, but he's on the phone the whole time with Sherrod Moore through the headset.
Yes. I mean, the other thing is they have to clearly define what he can and can't do. And I read on the day of the event, he can't be on premises from 12:01 a.m. onward, because otherwise, the guy would just buy a ticket through the State Street ticket office and show up in section 27 with that a collared shirt on and just cheer like nobody's business. So you do have to tell him exactly what's allowed and what's not.
Yeah. All right. So no concern about the first 3 games with Harbaugh out, right? And so these could be like 50-7 games.
Could very well be. And it's interesting because Michigan takes a lot of heat for this non-conference schedule, but I think they've learned, and granted they're playing Texas next year, they've learned that in the end, if you win the Big Ten and you beat Ohio State and you win in Indy, you're going to be in the playoff, and certainly when it expands for sure. So there's not a lot of reason or incentive to play somebody difficult early other than to appease Twitter. But we see it every year where Alabama will play somebody in the Chick-fil-A Classic. They'll play a name team like a Virginia. They will win 42-10. And in the waning minute 33, as they're counting down the clock and you see sad faces, Kirk Herbstreit will say, again, take nothing from Virginia. In fact, give them credit. This will not derail their opportunity for a successful season. But guess what? If they go 11-1, no one's going to care that it was Alabama they're going to get compared to a 12-0 team, and they're going to be viewed as less than. So, why take a risk, right?
Yeah, and next year it'll be another 4-team playoff, right? And so if you lose to Texas and beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, you're still in, right? Just like you said.
Right.
Now, the following year, it'll be a 12-team playoff. And the incentive, people talk about, it's less meaningful for the regular season. And I'm not sure, I used to think that, but I'm not sure I do anymore. I'm listening to the Joel Klatt podcast, and he's saying, hey, in like week 11, if there were a 12-team playoff last year, you'd have like 25 teams that have a legitimate chance to get in. So are we really dumbing down the regular season at that time? If we know that with 2 games left or 1 game left, we still have a chance?
I agree with you. I mean, everyone said that the bowls were ruined when you went to the playoff.
I don't care about the bowls anymore.
And nobody cares about the bowls. But this almost flexes it back toward there's a lot more that matters. It's like having baseball teams that are in the hunt at the trade deadline. The more you have, the more fun it is.
Yeah.
The more there is for people to talk about on TV, which is
I can't get enough
part
content.
of the gig.
I really can't get enough content, right? And now here we are putting out our own content.
Right.
Okay, so game by game, we have then the Big Ten. We have Rutgers at home. Okay, looks like it's going to be a noon game. Rutgers, I've been rewatching some of these games. They're better. Okay, it's not 78-0 type stuff anymore. They are better. I believe last year it was like just about even at halftime, like it was for so many games. But any concern about Rutgers?
Sure. We played this exact Rutgers team 2 years ago in the home opener, in the conference opener, on the same slot on the schedule. And we were sweating it out deep into the fourth quarter, if you recall.
It was a 1-score game at the end, right?
It was, and had a halftime lead, looked like things were cruising, and then the offense sort of ground to a halt. Here comes Rutgers, and they hung around, hanging around, like Teddy KGB said. And we ended up winning and ended up going and having a successful season as a result of it. But you can't lose to, Rutgers in a home opener and then go on to anything of substance.
I do feel like the team is different than the beginning of that. Even though the 21 season was excellent, I do feel like the team is different now, even though that was just like yesterday, because of the quarterback and because the play calling, I think, has really evolved, right? So I feel like we were stagnant, with the offense, and it's really they've popped the lid off.
No doubt. I mean, I think McNamara was probably quarterback back then, you had to sweat it out, right? Everyone said he makes great decisions. He's very accurate. He won't put you in a bad spot. Hey, when you play action and you went back to them, you held your breath a little, right? And so, we're in a much better place now. But my brother worked in college basketball for about 8 years, and he said people think you just roll out the balls and beat the snot out of people, and it's just not so.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. Similar story with Nebraska. I think that they have good players. And under Scott Frost in 21, they lost all their games by 5 points or less or something like that. They should have beat us in 21, remember? And last year he got fired, right, mid-season. So now they have an exciting new coach coming in, right? Does it take a long time for him to turn it around, or is he going to step in and really get the most out of these pretty good roster?
Yeah, I didn't follow Matt Rule all too much at Baylor, and I don't hold his NFL stint against them in the least. So probably a great hire for them. But you get an early sense of what's going on because I think they play at Minnesota in week 1, which, you want to see great week 1
matchups.
That's
next Thursday, right?
It's going to be, they always play Thursday night, TCF Bank Stadium, Minnesota hosts somebody. Yeah. And this year, instead of it being New Mexico State, it's a conference game against Nebraska. And, I'm loving it because you're going to get to see what's up. And imagine the pressure on PJ Fleck, right? I mean, we're not talking about Minnesota yet, but if you lose at home to Nebraska in your conference opener, with a newer quarterback.
He's won 9 or 10 games every year there, or the last 3 years anyway.
Yeah, he's not hot seat material, but people aren't going to be pleased if you can't beat Nebraska at home. To them, that's probably minimum requirements. So it'll be interesting to see what Nebraska is. We had to play there at night. We I had to sweat it out certainly, and they had one last possession where we had to kind of turn them away, and it was very stressful, and it was a key turning point in that season, I think, or key inflection point for sure. Do we know if that's at night yet? I don't think they've announced the game time yet. So
no, and then we go to at Minnesota, and I think that'll be a tough one. I think that'll be the first real challenge, in my opinion.
For sure. What I do feel good about is Minnesota looks and acts a lot like Michigan, right? They want to run the ball. Ibrahim used to carry it like 35 times, a game, which is unheard of. So they want to run the ball. They want to muscle you up front, and the quarterback is sort of McNamara-ish.
It's a new quarterback, I think.
Yeah, this Kaliak Manis, which I get a kick out of. Last year he started. They had Tanner Morgan, who was literally there 6 years, and then he got hurt, and they had to start this. I think his name's Athan Kaliak Manis. At State College in a whiteout, and he lost, 28-10 or something like that. But I have to laugh. PJ Fleck all week says, oh, yeah, we've prepped him. He's excellent. He can make all the throws. Coaches always say that in the week leading up to the game with a young quarterback, and then all of a sudden they tighten up, and in the game themselves, the guy goes, 7 for 18 for 126 yards and 2 interceptions. I thought the guy could make all the throws. Why don't you turn him loose? The reality is, they know what the kid can do, and they try not to put him in tough situations. So I actually feel better about the Minnesota game or as good than I do the Nebraska game because I know we won't be surprised.
Really? Okay. I was going to guess Minnesota would be tougher. Now, what about IU? They're coming to town the next week. I don't see a time on that, probably a nooner. Do they scare you at all? I mean, we smoked them pretty well last year.
They did. If you look at the IU, curve or whatever, the year that in COVID they beat Penn State on the first day of the season, Tom Allen had it going on, right? I mean, they've tried to find who's the answer at Indiana football for years, and he looked like he was the guy. He beat Michigan in that year.
They were ranked the next year preseason, yeah.
Right, and they Michael Penix was their quarterback. Now all of a sudden they've had turmoil at that position. Anytime you get a transfer at quarterback and you plug it in, I have my doubts as to how that works. Right, Northwestern's tried that years in a row, and I'm not sure about that. That's what gives me pause about the McNamara to Iowa experiment, but. I think, Indiana, Allen, they're a little bit on the downslide. Interesting, once upon a time, Zach Carpenter transferred there, and they viewed that as an upgrade for him to go to Indiana over Michigan because of where the two programs were, and certainly the tables have turned. So they've been a problem mostly in Bloomington. There's years we had to go to overtime. There's years we had to win at the end.
Right.
I feel good about this at home.
How do you feel about Penix at Washington?
He was great for them last year because he was able to stay on the field and stay healthy. And so probably the biggest loser in Penix returning is Michigan State because give Michigan State credit. They, signed up to play a home and home, true home and home with a Power 5. So I respect them for that. But they probably thought at least they'd only have to face the guy once. And, against all odds, the guy says, you know what, I think I'm going to come back for my 6th year.
Right.
Not good for Michigan State.
When Michigan State played at Washington last year, I remember thinking, wow, Michigan State is not as good without K9, like not as good. They looked awful. But I had to give Tucker credit because he never gave up in that game. He kept going at him, like trying to run quick, high tempo. Like he didn't put in the backups. He kept going. There's always a mathematical chance, until the fourth quarter at least.
Yeah.
But, I respect him for that. But I just don't think their team is very good. Speaking of, Tuck coming, Michigan State. It's going to be the night game in East Lansing. Right? You going to go to that one?
Probably not because the time of year it is starts to. Oh, and I definitely won't because now I see it's October 21st. I'm going to be out of town, so I hopefully will be able to catch
vacation
it. Vacation
or basketball?
Basketball related. We have preseason meetings with conferences and the NCAA that Saturday, Sunday down in Indianapolis.
So if you're home, would you prefer to go into the night hostile woodshed? Or would you like to stay at home and watch with friends?
Zero interest in going.
Really?
Even if I were offered a free ticket.
I'd love going into enemy territory.
It's stressful as it is, and it's just easier to be at home. And I don't know. I enjoy the home experience. I'm probably the reason that people are trying to appeal to get people back in the stadium because I enjoy the comforts of home and whatever. The last time I was at Michigan State, my brother convinced me I had bronchitis, and he had a ticket and convinced me to come anyway, and that was 2007, and Michigan took a 14-3 lead at the half. D'Antonio's first year. We felt good about it. They fell behind 24-14 and then had to rally to win, and in the middle of the second half, I'm like, I can't believe you dragged me out here with bronchitis to come see this stupid game, and by the end, I said, that was great. So,
yeah, that was a little brother game.
It was.
I remember watching that in Okemos at Maddox's place. They lived in Michigan for like a couple of years.
Okay.
Before they went to Texas. Mutual friends from college, and you're in the heart of Michigan State territory, right? And we pulled it out. I remember it was his kid's first birthday party too.
Huh.
Okay, so
Yes.
then Purdue. I know you love Purdue. You've been down to West Lafayette to watch games with your brother and your dad many times.
We went the day it was 95, and you were melting the moment you stepped out of the car. It was
So in the stadium, then it was 125 according to Beasel West, right? It's 30 degrees hotter.
yes. And Harbaugh was wearing long sleeves. I think if anything, just to prove that it was no big deal to him. Like imagine how slimy that was when he took it off and threw it in the hamper.
All right, yeah. So okay, Purdue's coming to town. They won the West last year. We handled them in the Big Ten championship game. I remember I went to that game as well. I'm sitting, I'm standing while the Purdue fans are exiting. I'm gonna wait till the very end, and the guy's like, "Well, we kept it close for a while," and I was like, "Okay."
Sure.
But that was the mindset, and I understand. And they're coming to town. It's gonna be cold, November. New coach as well,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So what do you think about those guys?
Yeah, I mean, no matter who Purdue plays at quarterback, they all seem to be the same type. David Blau, who's had stint with the Lions, and Aiden O'Connell, who's now gone, right? They all throw 5 touchdowns, maybe 2 interceptions, and one of them is like an 86-yard pick six the other way. It's like the ugliest looking box score you've ever seen when Purdue plays. So, I don't know much
and they
about
lost
Ryan
their receiver.
Walters. Yeah, the guy they got from Iowa, Charlie. I can't think of his name, Charlie Hustler or whatever. That
the guy was really good.
Yeah, that
he had a lot of catches in the Indy game.
they used to call him. Yep, for sure. He was a player. So
yeah, Charlie something.
Yep, Charlie Jones.
All right, so no real concern with Purdue.
No, yeah.
Now here's a real challenge in my opinion at Penn State. The beauty is that it's a day game. It's a nooner, no whiteout. Like I feel like that's worth 3 to 6 points.
Once again, parallels to 2 years ago. I think we played them at Penn State at noon in the exact juncture of the schedule that you're seeing there.
Yeah.
And that was the one where Michigan, had the lead. They started to fold. McNamara got hit, fumbled. Penn State recovered. They scored and went for 2, I think, to tie it at 14. I'm in the car driving somewhere, and at that moment, I felt the odds were extremely stacked against us. You're going to take over at the 25 if you don't make a first down. We know what happens next. And then they found Eric Hall for 45, 50 yards.
That short little drag route that was wide open, and no one, like, he ran 40-some.
Can see it in my mind. And of course, at that moment, I was, we're fresh off the COVID year, and I'm thinking, if you blow this now, there's a severe loss of momentum. And so it was a great Michigan win.
It was. And usually we've been trading blowouts at, home and home, right? And so that was going into Happy Valley with a tight win. I don't feel like we're up against a blowout again by any means, like we did with Saquon Barkley, and who's the quarterback? Forget. But remember when every time they had the ball, I mean, I was like,
Hackenberg?
No.
Okay.
No. He was the runner. Anyway, they get the ball. You're like afraid. You're like,
Sure.
Every snap.
Yes.
They're explosive.
It's a hard way to live.
They're more explosive than any other team I remember playing. Like even all these Ohio State juggernauts, like Barkley was amazing. But now all these national writers are talking about, Penn State having the best running back duo in the country. I'm like, what? Like, these guys are unproven,
Sure. And they have somebody new at quarterback. They had a good caretaker, and Sean Clifford, my nephew, goes to Penn State. He refers to him as Clifford, the big blue dog. And
he's been there for 6 years, right?
He's been there a long time, and now he's out. And so they have somebody that they, feel highly about. But we know what it's like to break in a new quarterback. You can talk all you want in August, but and they've got West Virginia coming to town, a team that's kind of like reeling in their own right, a coach that needs to win. And so that's just going to be, you want to talk about monster games in week 1, not this week 0 stuff that's the appetizer. This Nebraska, Minnesota, and West Virginia, Penn State are just huge games. Maybe not nationally where anyone would respect that, but in this neck of the woods where you and I appreciate good football.
I'll be watching every moment.
It'll be great.
We should get together for one of those.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Maryland, a lot of hype about Maryland again with Tua's brother. I can't pronounce the name, coming back, and it's at College Park. Joe Kennedy will certainly be there. Maybe I'll join him.
Sure. It's funny. We had a family trip a few years ago. And we hooked through Washington, D.C., show the kids some culture and history and things like that. And we took the red line up to College Park for dinner. And I said, hey, this says we're like 1.1 miles from Maryland Stadium. And the idea after a long day of walking that we were going to walk 1.1 miles into campus to see this, relatively generic football stadium, and 1.1 miles back was vetoed by my wife and kids. But have been to College Park, just not for athletics. And so, yeah, I mean, this game kind of reminds me of a few different games over the Michigan year, playing Ball State at home right before Ohio State, and not to compare the two because they're, not close. I mean, Maryland is probably an 8-win team or a 9-win team, right?
Yeah. They always start out like 4-0 too, right?
Yeah, they play somebody that they can, match up well with in the non-conference that's still like a Power 5, and if they win that, like a West Virginia or something, they're sort of off and running, and that's not a game you want to play from behind.
Okay, so last year they played us pretty tough. I feel like we're a much better team than we were at the start of last season. That was like the Big Ten opener, if I recall correctly. And then we are hosting, fortunately, the Buckeyes November 25th after Thanksgiving. It certainly will be a big noon Saturday on Fox with our buddies Klatt and company. Okay, can we make it 3 in a row?
Yeah, I mean, you haven't enjoyed for 20 some years the idea that, hey, believe it or not, when you win on the road at Ohio State, you get to host them the next year.
Unbelievable. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, Sparky Anderson once said momentum is tomorrow's starting pitcher, and maybe the football corollary of that is momentum is getting to host Ohio State at home, right? I mean, nobody enters a game at Columbus with any kind of like reasonable expectation that you're going to win. Your hope is that you got a shot, and then maybe it goes your way. So that was quite a surprise. And so, I mean, I almost, in some level, feel bad for Ryan Day and that coaching staff, because if you look at the record, I mean, it's fantastic in every respect, and yet he has to be looking at this and saying, what if? Because the corollary is also true. I guarantee they don't count on coming up and whipping us by 10 points. So there's a lot on the line for them. And granted, I don't invest a ton of time showing empathy to Ohio State and their plight.
Absolutely
but
not.
It's an interesting subplot nonetheless, right? It'll certainly speak to the desperation they have. Of course, everyone's fired up anyway, but I'm excited. I mean, really, if you tell me we've got healthy people leading into that game, I feel a whole heck of a lot better, right? And that's the one element. A lot of this is out of our control when it gets to that.
So on paper, in your gut, we run the table in the regular season, but we have to be aware, right? Think about the Lloyd years. We could have the same feeling and then trip up at Northwestern for no reason, or at home against Minnesota for no reason, or the classic Michigan State trap, okay? But going back to the beginning, you said that can happen, and we still win the Big Ten and still make the CFP.
Sure. Yes, and at the same token, if you're really going to truly have a special season, it's hard to do that season highlight video and then have to skip over some random Big Ten loss on the road, in the middle of October. So, 1997 was special to us, not just because we won the national championship, but because every week we went to the stadium knowing everything was on the line, and yet they still found a way to win. And so, I think that,
So who comes
you're always
out
at
of the
risk.
West? Who comes out of the West?
Well, it's almost like process of elimination about who won't, right? And I think you've got a shot if you're Illinois, but once again, they're bringing in an outsider at quarterback, I think, right?
I'm glad we're not playing them.
Yeah, glad to avoid Illinois. That was a trouble spot last year. It's interesting because we just took it right to them out of the gate, and like, it's exactly what we need, stress-free. And then it was anything but, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably not Minnesota. It's probably not Nebraska. It's definitely not Northwestern. So that's why people are excited up in Madison, is because they see that the road has, there for Luke Fickell and for the taking. Of course, they didn't look very good in the spring game. You don't necessarily expect them to, but they've got momentum themselves.
So we should be able to handle any of the teams from the West. So we three-peat, and then we're back in the CFP. TCU game, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, it was the trap game basically. It was the Michigan State.
And then we run it for 54 yards on the first play. It's like, I knew we could power through these guys up front. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to be up against Alabama, Georgia, pick your USC, pick your other
Clemson
team.
will want to get back, right?
I mean, okay, the classic power teams. So we haven't figured that out, right? Now, what do you think this year?
I was just so thrilled to slot ourselves with TCU. I've never been more certain
Right.
of the quality of a matchup, of wanting to be right where we
It
were
was like
at.
playing Sister Jean in the Final Four in
And
18.
of course, we were down 9 with 10 minutes to go in that game to Sister Jean, right? But yes, you're right. I mean, sometimes those things are just too perfect. It's a
Yeah.
9 and a 2 against a 6. You know the other shoe's about to drop, right? So anyhow, um, yeah, I mean, those teams are always going to be difficult because Dave Shannon, PhD of college football, would say it's always about the talent, right? And so that is on the 12 games you're listing there, that's what stacks up favorably for us. And then you get to the 4 and you realize that teams like Georgia will outpace us with the 5 stars and the 4 stars. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally thrilled with all the player development that you see at Michigan, right?
Yeah.
You're not seeing new names in the projected depth chart. You're like, I know that guy. I know that name. Oh, he played a role for us last year, right? You're asking everyone to play their best game and keep up with people that have already been there that have a little bit of a psychological advantage. But I'm kind of talking a little bit in circles because I never played football, and the locker room concepts and things about program building are beyond my comprehension. I mean, I still don't think we, big picture, have an answer to the question, what makes a successful college football program? What would make Michigan flip the switch from 2-4 in 2020, where the fact they didn't play Ohio State that year might have saved Michigan football, right?
It would have been bad.
It would have been bad. And yet they come back, and in 21 and 22, you couldn't have predicted this. So what causes 85 people or whatever in a locker room to flip the switch and do great things, right? And I don't think we'll ever have the answer to that question. But if you have enough talent and you have enough momentum and everyone believes in the mission, I think you got a shot. And that's what you're asking for in these games, right? Is, do you have a shot? The first Georgia game was a shell shock. We get it. If we played 10 times last year, we would have won 8. Okay, let's learn from it and take the next step, right? I mean, the thing about Harbaugh is they said he'd never stay. He stayed. They said he'd never beat Ohio State. He did. They said he'd never win the West. He did. They said he'd never go to Indy, never win in Indy, never get to the CFP. He continues to check these off, and every time people that are naysayers have less and less.
He's a winner. Let's talk about quarterback for a minute. So Joel Klatt had his preseason top 5: Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, and then Penn State. So the only team out of those top 5 that have a returning quarterback is J.J. McCarthy, Michigan. The other 4, they'll be new quarterbacks. Okay, so you said, hey, you can be an August hype machine, right? About a quarterback who's unproven, but he's like, I don't care about the quarterback because I know that the coaches are outstanding and the entire rest of the team is outstanding, right? So can you plug a Jack Navarre into Georgia and still be a juggernaut?
I don't think so, because on 3rd and 7, you're going to have to throw the ball, and you have somebody that the longer they've seen it, the more decisions they can make. I think they're going to put you in better spots for that. Doesn't mean any of those other 4 quarterbacks can't get there over the course of the year, but until they prove it, they haven't proven it, right? And we have the luxury of having somebody that we have total trust in. Doesn't mean he's going to, go 26 touchdowns and 0 interceptions on the year. No one expects that, but the idea that there's going to be good, competent decision making, and of course, the health is critical, right? In years past, we had this whole, hey, I'm going to start, McNamara in one game and McCarthy in game 2, and we'll probably be okay with either one. And now you're seeing a drop off that's somewhat significant. And so the health of the guy behind center is,
I kind of like the way that he played that out, by the way. I thought it was
he got
pretty
criticism for it, and now you see
It was good leadership
all the time. It was great, and it was decisive, and it told everyone what they were going to do, and the decision was laid clear.
Yeah.
And no one ever goes back and gives him credit for those things 12 weeks down the road when the season's successful, but they want to give him a problem about it in late August.
Let's talk about 2004 for a second, right? Gutierrez got hurt right before the first game, so Chad Henne steps in. No one even knew that was happening, right until kickoff. And so Chad comes in. He's throwing to Braylon for the whole year. They have a share of the Big Ten, So there's an example, right, where you can have a true freshman come in and still have great success if everyone. I think that was a great team. It was a good team. That was like the Michigan State comeback, yeah. And I don't think that was the Rose Bowl, the Texas Rose Bowl game. I think that was a couple of years later, wasn't it?
They had 2 Rose Bowl games that were in close succession.
Texas and USC.
And the USC one, didn't they lose 13-3 or something? It was low scoring.
The Texas one was like last second field goal kind of thing. And then the USC one was a blowout.
It was the weekend I got engaged, New Year's of turning into 05, and Texas kicked the field goal to beat us, and I was very upset, and I said, don't worry, Michigan gets here most years.
That's funny. Well, that's probably a good point to close out on. So, any closing thoughts? Any fun predictions? Any wacky, you know?
I'm hoping it's not wacky, right? Like
Right.
this is
Yeah.
the year you don't want craziness to happen. You just want to kind of play the games and have everything go according to plan, right? It's funny compared to prior quarterbacks we've had. At least I don't think there's going to be an emphasis on running the football for the quarterback. I think he'll be very safe with his body. Remember how Dylan McCaffrey used to just take chances, take shots, kind of go head to head with linebackers and things like that. I mean, even I saw Brian Greasy in certain games on tape run the football at Penn State, and you'd hear the crack of the pads, the types of things you wouldn't want to subject your quarterback to nowadays. So I'm just hoping everything goes according to the book. And if that's the case, I think it's going to be a special year.
Well, there you have it. We have an undefeated prediction CFP appearance. Sounds like, we have a real chance according to Mr. Duprey here, Dupe Scoop. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you.
By the way, I love your T-shirt.
Hey.
And if you're listening on the podcast, hey, check out the video edition on YouTube. You get to look at the schedule and you get to look at the T-shirts. Yeah, there you go. So we'll see you next time, and we'd love to have you back next year.
All right, let's do it.